Stop the tape. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a knife. The cameras kept rolling for 3 more seconds before the director finally called cut. The woman in the guest chair had just said something that changed everything, not just for her family sitting in the front row, but for everyone in that room. Her hands trembled as she held a worn photograph. Her daughter's face had gone completely white. And Dr. Phil, the man who had heard thousands of confessions over 2 decades, stood frozen, processing words that would rewrite a family's entire history. What she had just admitted would force Dr. Phil to make a choice he had never made before on camera. 48 hours earlier, the email had arrived at the Dr. Phil show's production office with a subject line that stopped the senior producer mid-scroll. "I've been lying to my family for 40 years and I can't do it anymore." The woman's name was Margaret Reynolds. She was 62 years old, a grandmother of 5, and by all appearances, the matriarch of a close-knit family from Ohio. Her daughter, Jennifer, had submitted the show request on her behalf, believing her mother needed help processing family stress. Jennifer had no idea what was really coming. The pre-interview had been routine. Margaret talked about feeling distant from her family, about carrying a burden that was destroying her from the inside. The producers assumed it was the typical guilt many aging parents feel, regrets about past parenting choices, perhaps an affair decades ago. They scheduled a standard family reconciliation episode. But Margaret had been very careful about what she revealed in the pre-interview. She was saving the truth for the cameras. On the day of taping, Margaret arrived at the studio 3 hours early. She sat in the green room, clutching a manila envelope that she refused to let the production assistants hold. Inside were 3 items. A photograph from 1983, a birth certificate, and a letter she had written the night before. Jennifer arrived with her husband and their 2 teenage children, Margaret's grandchildren. The family was nervous but excited. This was Dr. Phil. He fixed families. Whatever was bothering Grandma, he would help them work through it. As they settled into the audience seats, Jennifer leaned over to her husband. "Mom's been acting so strange lately. I hope Dr. Phil can figure out what's wrong." She had no idea that in less than an hour, everything she believed about her life would be a lie. The show began normally. Dr. Phil welcomed the audience, introduced Margaret as a woman carrying a secret that's tearing her apart, and invited her to the stage. Margaret walked slowly, deliberately, still holding that envelope. "Margaret," Dr. Phil began, settling into his chair with that signature directness. "Your daughter Jennifer submitted your story because she's worried about you. She says you've become withdrawn, that you're not yourself. Talk to me about what's going on." Margaret nodded, her hands gripping the envelope tighter. "Dr. Phil, I need to tell my family something I should have told them 40 years ago." Jennifer shifted uncomfortably in her seat. This sounded more serious than she expected. "I've been carrying this my entire adult life," Margaret continued, her voice beginning to shake. "Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering. I've been living a lie." Dr. Phil leaned forward. "What kind of lie, Margaret?" This was the moment everything changed. Margaret turned to look directly at her daughter in the audience. Tears were already streaming down her face. "Jennifer, honey, I need you to come up here with me." Jennifer looked confused but stood up. As she walked toward the stage, Dr. Phil's expression shifted. Something in Margaret's tone had triggered his instinct, the one that had developed over thousands of hours of human crisis. This wasn't going where anyone expected. Jennifer sat down next to her mother, taking her hand. "Mom, what's going on? You're scaring me." Margaret looked at Dr. Phil, then back at her daughter. She opened the manila envelope and pulled out the photograph. It showed a young Margaret, maybe 22 years old, holding a newborn baby. "This is you," Margaret said, handing Jennifer the photo. "The day you were born. April 15th, 1983. Jennifer smiled through her confusion. "I know, Mom. I've seen this picture before." "No," Margaret whispered. "You haven't. Not really. Because I never told you the truth about who I was that day." Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. Margaret. Dr. Phil's voice was gentle but firm. What are you about to say? Margaret took a shuddering breath. Jennifer, the woman in this picture is me. But the baby isn't you. The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. Jennifer's face went through 3 emotions in 2 seconds: confusion, disbelief, denial. What? Jennifer's voice was barely audible. What are you talking about? The baby in this picture is my daughter. Margaret continued, each word clearly causing her physical pain. She died 3 days after this photo was taken. SIDS. Sudden infant death syndrome. Jennifer's husband stood up in the audience. The teenagers looked at each other, not understanding what was happening. Dr. Phil raised his hand slightly toward the cameras, a signal his crew knew meant keep rolling but be ready for anything. Mom, I don't understand. If that baby died, then who am I? What Margaret said next would be replayed millions of times, analyzed, debated, and remembered as one of the most shocking confessions in television history. 2 weeks after I lost my daughter, I was destroyed. Your father, the man you knew as your father, he had left me right after the funeral. He couldn't handle the grief. I was alone, broken, and I wanted to die. Margaret pulled out the second document from the envelope. A birth certificate. But not Jennifer's. I went to the hospital one day, just to feel close to where I'd held her. And I heard a baby crying in the hallway. A nurse was holding her, trying to calm her down. I asked if I could help. The nurse looked exhausted and said yes. Dr. Phil's expression had shifted into something his audience rarely saw, genuine shock mixed with professional duty to handle what was unfolding. That baby was you, Jennifer. You had been left at the hospital. Your biological mother had abandoned you. No note, no name, nothing. The state was about to take you into foster care. Stop the tape. Dr. Phil stood up. The director called cut. For the first time in the show's history, Dr. Phil walked off the stage mid-taping and headed toward the production booth. The audience sat in stunned silence. Jennifer was frozen in her chair, the birth certificate in her shaking hands. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. In the booth, Dr. Phil pulled aside the senior producer and the show's on-call therapist. We need to handle this differently. This isn't entertainment anymore. This woman just confessed to what could be considered kidnapping. That daughter is about to have a complete identity crisis. I need you to have crisis counselors ready the moment we stop recording. The producer nodded. Do you want to continue taping? Dr. Phil thought for a moment. Yes. But we're going to do this my way. Get legal on standby, and I want DNA testing resources ready before this family leaves the building. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil walked back onto the stage. The cameras resumed rolling. He sat down, not in his usual chair, but on the edge of the platform, closer to Margaret and Jennifer. This wasn't about authority anymore. This was about truth. Margaret, he said quietly, you took a baby from a hospital. You raised her as your own. You falsified documents. You created an entire identity. Do you understand the legal implications of what you've just confessed? Yes, Margaret whispered. I've known for 40 years. That's why I'm here. I can't die with a secret. Jennifer deserves to know the truth. Even if she hates me. Even if I go to jail. Jennifer finally spoke, her voice hollow. All these years, you weren't my mother? I am your mother, Margaret said fiercely, the first strength returning to her voice. I raised you. I loved you. I sacrificed everything for you. But biologically, no. I'm not. Then who is? Who am I? But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil pulled out his phone, something he never did on camera. He had made a call during the break. Margaret, you said the baby was abandoned at the hospital. Do you remember which hospital? St. Mary's. In Columbus. And you never tried to find out about the biological mother? Margaret shook her head. I was terrified. I thought if I looked, someone would take Jennifer away from me. Dr. Phil looked directly into the camera. Here's what we're going to do. With Jennifer's permission, we're going to help find answers. Real answers? Because Jennifer deserves to know her full story. And Margaret, you deserve to finally stop running. He turned to Jennifer. I know this is overwhelming. But I promise you, we're not going to leave you alone in this. Do you want to know who your biological mother was? Jennifer looked at Margaret, the woman who had been her mother for 41 years. Then she looked at Dr. Phil. Yes. I need to know. Dr. Phil nodded and signaled to his assistant off camera. We've already started the process. We contacted St. Mary's Hospital Records Department this morning. They're sending over what they have from 1983. It's not much, but it's a start. The studio was absolutely silent. Even the audience members who had been crying were now holding their breath. An assistant walked onto the stage carrying a tablet. Dr. Phil took it and read for a moment. His expression was unreadable. Margaret, Jennifer, the records from St. Mary's show that on April 28, 1983, a baby girl was left at the hospital. There was actually a note. It had been filed away in the cold case system. He handed the tablet to Jennifer. On the screen was a photo of a handwritten note, faded but still legible. I can't give her what she needs. Please find her a family who can love her. Her name is Hope. Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth. Hope. My biological mother named me Hope. Margaret began sobbing. I didn't know. I never knew there was a note. They told me there was nothing. Dr. Phil's voice was gentle but firm. Jennifer, your biological mother didn't just abandon you. She made an impossible choice because she believed you deserved more than she could give. And Margaret didn't steal you. She saved you from a system that might have failed you. This was the moment Dr. Phil did something he had never done in 20 years of television. He stood up and addressed the cameras directly. To everyone watching, what you just witnessed is complicated. There are legal issues here that will need to be addressed. But there's also something else. Two women who loved the same child in different ways. One who gave her life, and one who gave her a name. He turned back to Margaret and Jennifer. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to connect you with legal counsel who specializes in these cases. We're going to help you navigate whatever comes next. And we're going to help you find your biological mother, Jennifer, if that's what you want. Jennifer looked at Margaret. Mom, because you are my mom, no matter what, did you ever love me, or was I just a replacement? Margaret grabbed her daughter's hands. You were never a replacement. You were a miracle. When I held you, I felt alive again. Everything I did, every lie I told, was because I couldn't imagine a world without you in it. I know it was wrong, but I would do it again. The studio erupted in tears. Not polite sniffles, but raw, collective sobbing. Dr. Phil let the moment breathe. Then he said something that would become one of his most quoted lines. Love isn't always legal. But that doesn't make it less real. He pulled out a business card from his pocket and handed it to Jennifer. This is the contact for our family counseling network. You're going to need help processing this. Both of you. And when you're ready, we'll help you find your biological mother if she can be found. Jennifer took the card, then turned to Margaret. I'm angry. I'm confused. I don't know how I feel about anything right now. But I need you to know, you're still my mom. Margaret collapsed into her daughter's arms. The audience stood up, not in applause, but in silent respect for what they had just witnessed. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The cameras kept rolling as Dr. Phil walked Jennifer and Margaret off the stage. In the wings, the crisis counselor was already waiting. The legal team was on standby. And the social workers who specialized in adoption reunification were preparing information packets. 6 months later, a follow-up special revealed they had found Jennifer's biological mother. Her name was Rachel. She had been 17 when she gave birth, a victim of assault with no support. Leaving Jennifer at the hospital had been her only option. She had spent 40 years wondering if her daughter was okay. The reunion happened off camera, at Jennifer's request. But she shared this. Meeting Rachel didn't replace my mom. It completed me. I have two mothers now. One who gave me life, and one who gave me a life. And I'm grateful for both. The legacy of that confession extended far beyond one family. Dr. Phil used the case to launch a national conversation about closed adoption systems, about the desperation that leads to impossible choices, and about the complexity of love and law. He partnered with organizations that help connect families separated by circumstances, legal or otherwise. Margaret became an advocate for adoption reform, speaking openly about her mistake and the system that she felt had failed both her and Jennifer. Rachel started a support group for young mothers in crisis, ensuring they had resources she never had. And Jennifer? She wrote a book titled, Two Mothers, One Daughter. That became a bestseller and helped countless adoptees navigate their own identity journeys. The manila envelope that started it all, the photograph, the birth certificate, and the letter, sits in Jennifer's home office now, in a frame alongside two other photos, one of her with Margaret, and one of her with Rachel. Dr. Phil would later say in interviews that this episode changed how he approached his show. I realized that day that my job isn't just to fix problems or call out bad behavior. Sometimes it's to hold space for complicated truths. Margaret wasn't a villain. Rachel wasn't a failure. Jennifer wasn't a victim. They were three women trying to survive in a world that doesn't always make room for messy, complicated love. The confession that stopped the cameras that day started conversations that are still happening. About adoption ethics. About the statute of limitations on love. About forgiveness and identity and the impossible choices people make when they're desperate. And it all started because one grandmother decided that truth, no matter how painful, was better than living one more day with a lie. The studio that day witnessed something rare, the moment when television stopped being entertainment and became a mirror reflecting the complicated, beautiful, heartbreaking reality of human connection. That's the power of truth. And that's why Dr. Phil stopped the tape.